Just a quick heads up, there is talk of suicide in this episode. Sensitive listeners be advised. If you or someone you know is thinking about suicide, call the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline immediately by dialing 988. Thank you. Hi, and welcome to the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the Rising Above Addiction, with my guest, Chase Warburton. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I coach men who want to stop suffering in relationship and who want a deeper sense of love and connection. I coach them how to do it and how to be the best version of themselves and live the life they love. In this bonus episode, you'll hear my conversation with Chase Warburton. He is the host of the podcast, The Wellness Center, where he is an advocate for destigmatizing mental health. This guy has been on quite a journey on his path to love, self-love, and love in relationship. As a survivor of an 18-year-long battle with porn, sex, and drug addiction, Chase has transformed his life and has risen above his adversities against all odds to find love and success as an entrepreneur. His transformation is truly inspiring. So fasten your seatbelts. The ride may get bumpy at times. It's the Men on the Path to Love podcast. So welcome, Chase, to Men on the Path to Love.
Hey, thank you for having me, Bill. I really appreciate your time.
Well, I'm glad you reached out because you have quite a story to tell, and I'm all about telling stories. I tell my story, I tell stories about my clients, and stories about people I know to really help to shine the authentic light on living and being on the path to love. So I'm going to ask you to start out with your amazing story and take as long as you need.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate it. And I just want to emphasize how important stories are, right? If you think about all of the great names, all of the great people, it's because they were great storytellers. Exactly. So I think your drive to tell stories is truly a beautiful one. But yeah, so a little bit about me, just so you know, some of like the cookie cutter answers. So my name is Chase. I live in Utah. I'm 28 years old. I'm married. I've been married for about 6 years. I've got 2 kids, a third one on the way. Right. This little one is due in December. And just kind of like a little bit about my story. So it starts very, very young, right? I've done a lot of therapy work, but, mental health and issues that I dealt with started around the time I was 8 years old, right? That I really started noticing things. Addiction started coming into my life, unhealthy behaviors and patterns. I was depressed and suicidal by the time I was 10, by the time I made my first attempt with suicide.
And I'm just going to interrupt you to share a little bit of what that experience was when you were 8 years old.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got introduced to pornography. Okay. I was at a Christian church, and I was doing a computer technology class in the summer just to learn about how computers work. So at the end of class, last 5 or so minutes, we had the opportunity just to play some online games, right? Some kids went to the Disney Channel or Cartoon Network and all this stuff. And there was this one kid, I don't know or remember what game he was playing, but he was playing it, and I was like, I want to play that game too. It looks like fun. Mm-hmm. So I tried to copy the URL down, and when I clicked search, a naked lady popped up on the screen.
Whoa.
And I remember I was 8 years old, so I was sitting there like all wide-eyed, and I was like, what is this?
Right.
And my eyes got covered pretty quick, and ever since then, I got really curious about it and started exploring it more and more. So that was kind of my first trip into addiction. And I don't know if the people ever told my parents, to be honest with you. It was so long, 20 years ago. But, I got curious and I started looking more and delving more into that, and would get caught and shamed for it quite a bit. I remember very specifically my dad telling me once that like Satan would be tickled pink with me and my behavior, which I think at the time I was like 10 or 12, was not the right thing to say. I love him to death. It wasn't the right thing to say.
I want to support you, Chase, in that I was exposed at an early age as well, around 6 years old. And then to hear my father say, if you masturbate, you're queer, you're gay. And, all those kind of things that parents say to shame kids.
Yeah, it's toxic. It's not healthy. They're doing their best, right? We don't want to bash on parents. They really are doing great, but it wasn't the healthiest option, and that's okay. So that happened when I was 8. I remember around the time I was 10, I was suicidal. I had my first suicidal attempt, and what that looked like was I had a bunch of swords that I collected, and I still love swords to this day. And what I would do is I would lay in my bed and I would look up at the swords that were hanging up on the racks, and I would hit my body against my wall, against the wall in the bed, in hopes that the swords would fall down and impale me.
Wow. Wow.
Right. And then, started questioning like Christianity and spirituality when I was about 13 and 14, started not believing in the church. I was bullied really bad by a lot of the people that I attended my church with, a lot of the kids my age. And I started having these beliefs of like, man, why would I go to a church? Why would I be involved with a church that fosters so much hate
Right.
and bully and so much awfulness, right? And what I never understood is that spirituality and going to church, whatever denomination you go to, whatever religion you're associated with, they're hospitals for the sick. That's it,
Mm. Hmm.
right? And so for me, it was I didn't realize that. I didn't connect in my young teenage brain.
Sure.
So I left the church that I was associated with, which was the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, nicknamed the Mormons.
Right.
And I got into smoking and drinking and pill popping and sex addiction and video games and food and TV and you name it. I did it all, right?
Yeah.
Got it.
I hear you.
So I started doing that and found a friend group that accepted me that also partied. And so I got more into the partying scene, more into those kind of negative behaviors and patterns.
And that's a
Um,
big part of it too, Chase, is having that peer group that is right along with you, and that just entices you to do it more. And you feel accepted.
Oh, 100%, man. So like if you go to church and you're getting bullied by the people in church, you don't want to be around that. No one likes being bullied and teased. And when
Exactly.
you have people that accept you and they're like, "Hey, we'll accept you and we'll accept you more if you smoke this pot," and you
Right.
do it in a kind of cool way, absolutely you're going to smoke the pot. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Humans need acceptance. Yeah, and so I kind of got into that realm pretty aggressively and went down that life. And all the while too, my parents were fighting quite a bit, right? They were just doing their best too, but I think where it was really hard for me is that my parents would pit me against each other,
Mm.
right? So multiple times throughout a week, sometimes daily, I'd be talking to my dad, just, "Hey dad, how you doing?" and stuff. And, he'd be like, "Man, your mom is such a bitch. And I'm so sick of her. And she's, all the things." And then, another day I'd be talking to my mom and she'd be like, "Your dad's a bastard and he's a liar and he's a dick." And all
Hmm.
these things. So it's like I had this false sense of love growing up. It's like you had to hate one another. So I could never I could never keep a girlfriend because I was just a bitter, angry person. I was doing way too many drugs and partying way too hard. And this was all in high school, right? And then I get to this point when I'm 18 years old and I'm finally like, you know what? I am going to prove my mom wrong and I'm actually going to do something with my life. So I
Hmm.
graduated high school early and I moved across the country to Arkansas to go install alarm systems. And I remember going out there, a really hard experience. Fun, right? Great opportunity to go travel at a young age, a really hard experience. But in that first summer that I was there, I lost my grandpa and my sister.
Mm.
My grandpa died to old age and my sister died by suicide. She was 16 at the time.
So sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So the partying went from a social acceptance friendly thing
Right.
to a coping mechanism, right? Is where the fun went away from it. And I just kept spiraling and getting worse and worse. And I got to this point where I was drinking Everclear,
Mm.
right, on a weekly basis. And if you guys don't know what Everclear is for those listening, it's that kind of alcohol that makes you go blind. It's a, it's a better cleaner than it is a beverage. And I was smoking close to a pack of cigarettes a day. I was vaping close to a bottle a day as well. I was consuming all the food and women and drugs and everything that I could get my hands on. And when I was 19, I went to a mental health institution. I admitted myself into a hospital because I was going to kill myself
Mhm.
again. And around that time, I was also diagnosed with severe chronic depression. And then close to my 21st birthday, right? Life had just continued to spiral and be awful. And 3 days before my 21st birthday, I remember waking up at a friend's house, or not 3 days before, but close to 3 days before my 21st birthday. I remember waking up on a tile floor, spooning a bunch of guys,
Mm.
totally drunk, totally hungover, and just absolutely hating my entire existence. It sucked.
Of
And see, like I'm heterosexual, no judgment against any like homosexual or whatever. I don't know the
course.
proper terminology to
Of
be
course.
honest with you, so please forgive me for my ignorance. But I was heterosexual, and so it wasn't a fun experience to wake up cuddling a bunch of guys on the tile floor.
Hmm.
And I was just like, man, something's got to change. So I remember going back to my bishop ecclesiastical leader 3 days before my 21st birthday, and I just sat with him for what felt like 4 hours. And I just shared everything with him from the time I was 8, all of the porn, all of the drugs, all of the sex, all the partying,
Wow.
all of the things that didn't serve me, that weren't helping me.
That must have been pretty liberating to be able to share all that.
It was one of the hardest experiences I've ever had
Yeah.
and one of the best. Like you said, yeah, it's if you have something on your chest, like if you guys are listening, honesty is what gets rid of it,
Yep.
right? That weight on your chest, talking to someone about it
Sure.
and being willing to talk to someone about it. So, yeah, you're right. It was Bill. It was an amazing experience to share that with him shamelessly.
Hmm.
The most important thing that happened in this situation, because I was only, I was young, I was 20, almost 21, is he received me with love,
Mm,
right? No judgment, acceptance, and love.
beautiful.
And yeah, and that was a huge game changer for me. And I almost can guarantee if he would have met me with, why would you ever do that kind of stuff? Shame on you. You should
Mhm.
know better. You grew up with God in your life. I wouldn't have been able to change.
Yeah.
Right. I was so influential at that young age. And
You were so vulnerable to share all that and then to
yeah,
be shamed with it. Oh my God. Yeah,
yeah, that would just confirm all of the inadequacies, right?
exactly.
So, but yeah, no, I was received with love, and then I walked away from everything cold turkey.
Mm.
All of the drugs, all of the alcohol, all of the vaping, the pills, that you name it, the premarital sex. I walked away all of it cold turkey. And I was thoroughly blessed that I didn't get a single withdrawal.
Wow.
Yeah. The only thing I wasn't able to quit was pornography.
Hmm.
And that, again, the kind of the how often I was using it, like the frequency definitely was a lot less. It was still in my life though.
Right.
And kind of my last D-Day, Discovery Day, my last Doomsday, whatever you want to call it, was around the time that my second child, her name is Willow, she's a little Spitfire, was born. Probably a few weeks after, I remember holding her one day and looking at her and just feeling so much love and then so much shame as a man. And I was like, wow, I'm such a dirtbag.
Mm,
Like, I'm lying to my wife, I'm watching pornography from time to time. And I was like, man, I would never want my daughter to marry a guy like me.
wow.
Yeah. So I ended up talking to my wife about a lot of the issues, which she knew about, but I downplayed them and minimized them. And then I finally joined a group and I've been sober ever since. And
Wow.
that's a little over 3 years running.
Well, congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks, man. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Wow. Well, I'm sure you're touching folks out there that have been through any of all or all of what you've been through.
Yeah.
And it's so important for others to hear stories like yours so they know they're not alone in the world.
Yes.
And not only that, you can change, you can heal from this.
Yeah.
And I saw in your bio information about five key questions that you ask when you're working with folks. Can you go through those for us?
Yeah. So it's not the 5 key questions, but it's close. It's the 5 key areas of your life,
Okay, very
right?
good.
So I'm all about helping people change reasonably,
Okay,
right? Like I know that there are those people out there, those mentors out there that believe in extreme radical change.
right.
And I think there is a time and place for it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just not the direction I take. So what I do is I look at every single person and I want to make sure that they have 3 things and then a keystone, right? Three, I call them the 3 pillars in the keystone. Still kind of figuring that one out a little bit.
Okay.
Because my wife says, well, you need to have two pieces of an arch and a keystone. I was like, well, we're just going to use a metaphorical 3 here. But but I believe you need 3 things and then the keystone. So the first thing that you need is self-awareness,
Okay.
right? As a human being, you just need to be aware of who you are and the experiences that you're feeling.
And we as men, that's tough for us at times.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. Like growing up in a world of toxic masculinity, to
Hmm.
ask someone to be self-aware and feel themselves, like
Yeah. Right, exactly.
it's tough. It's tough. And so when I ask guys, I'm like, well, why are you angry? And they'll be like, well, I'm pissed off because my wife said something.
Hmm.
Cool. At least you're self-aware. Why does that make you angry? Well, because she's just not listening to me. Okay, so you don't feel like you're being listened to. I don't. Cool. That's self-awareness.
Hmm.
That's totally okay. Right. The second is rigorous acceptance. Right. Once you have the awareness, you need to accept that whatever you're feeling is okay, specifically because you're feeling it.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can't really control that, so you might as well at least accept it. You don't have to do anything with it, right?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't mean you're okay with it.
Right, right.
It just means you accept it. Right. It's like, some of those people say, why me? It's like, because you,
Hmm.
right? There's nothing wrong with you.
It's just what is.
It's just what it is. Exactly. Another term maybe is radical acceptance. I just don't like the word radical.
Right.
So rigorous acceptance. And then the third is self-love,
Okay.
right? You have to be able to realize that you're angry and that you're sad and that you have all of these negative emotions that the toxic masculinity or the world has taught you isn't okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And I work a lot with self-compassion. I did a whole episode on it, and it's a big
Cool.
part of my practice. And if you can't treat yourself kind as you would someone that you love and care about, you're not going to have that compassion for the other person.
Exactly. I love that. Yeah. And I'm sure we could spend a whole
Oh yeah.
4 or 5 episodes on self-compassion.
No doubt.
It's so deep. And it goes down like your self-compassion in a nutshell, it goes all the way down to your core beliefs,
Hmm.
right? Those values that which you guide your whole life on, whether you know it or not.
Right.
So yeah, so it's being self-aware of whatever you're feeling, being okay that you're feeling it because it's a human experience to feel it, and you're going to love yourself anyways. And I don't like using the word but because I feel like but gets rid of it,
Takes away
right? So,
the prior statement. Yeah.
exactly. So you have to be okay and love yourself.
There you go.
And then once you have all of those three things, you have a really solid foundation for growth, right? And then the keystone, the thing that really solidifies it is a connection with a higher power,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's your higher self, whether that's the Dalai Lama or the Buddha, whether that is, the neighbor down the street that you idolize. It doesn't matter. It's a higher power that you're connected to. For me, it's Jesus Christ,
Gotcha.
right? Once you have that higher power, then you're ready for what I call the 1% mentality. And what we do is we get people to start thinking about 1% shifts in their life. And how we do that is we look at the five main categories that someone lives in, right? You have your physical self,
Mm.
which can be your working out, your diet, how you feel about your body, right? All those things. We have your spiritual self, right? That connection with a higher power. We have your social self, right? Your relationships with other people, like outside of your like intermost relationships.
Right.
We have your mental self, which is your mental health. And then we have your relational self, which is that relationship with a spouse or partner or significant other and your kids, right? Those really close interpersonal relationships. And what we do is we take each one of those areas, and I love to do self-assessments with people. And when you do the self-assessment, I'm a big advocate of not doing between 1 and 10 because
Mm.
everyone does 1 and 10. I'm going to change the number every time I do an assessment with someone because it's going to make you think,
Ah.
right? If I said, Bill, give me a scale on 1 to 10 of how you're doing physically today. You'll be like, oh, I'm 5. Cool. Hey, Bill, give me a scale from 1 to 17 on how you're doing today physically.
Oh, yeah. Let me think about that. Yeah.
Exactly. So I make people thinking about it. And then I think, okay, the whole goal is to change by 1%. So if you're at 17, let's break the threshold and make an 18 on the scale. If you're at 2, okay, how can we get to 3, right, on the scale? Once we take the assessment, right, then what we do is I typically like to walk my client through a meditation, right? I believe that all of us have a very deep subconscious, right? We're
No
all
doubt.
very intuitive beings and we know what we need. And
Hmm.
sometimes people have a hard time being self-aware at the start. So we go through a meditation and we let their subconscious tell them what they need. Right. So, like, let's say, for example, we're working on the physical 1% mindset.
Hmm.
And I think, okay, you want to change physically. I want to be lighter. And okay, well, let's look at ways in which we can change 1%, right? The 1% mentality. And the 1% mentality isn't 1% shifts every single day because that's exhausting. But
Hmm.
what it is it's taking one of those five areas, shifting 1%, doing that until it becomes a habit, and then choosing another 1% shift,
Okay.
right? So, like, I love the example of milk, right? Let's say someone drinks whole milk, big fan of whole milk. And I'll tell them, okay, a 1% shift is switching to 2% milk.
Mm.
Right. If you can switch to 2% milk, still consume the same amount of milk, let's say it's 2 cups a day, you're still going to consume 2 cups of milk a day. That's great.
Hmm.
A whole milk to a 2% milk, honestly, after the second cup, you're not going to notice a difference.
Right.
But over the course of 2 years, you're going to lose 14 pounds worth of calories in just shifting between whole milk and 2% milk.
Great example. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Hmm.
And so it's all about what small, consistent changes can I make habits that are going to ultimately lead into the life I want.
Very good.
Yeah. So that's my 1% mentality.
I love that approach because it's gradual and that's how we change. We don't, I mean, you went cold turkey in your story and that's pretty rare for most
Very.
people. But to take those 1% jumps, that's doable. That's something you can attain.
Exactly. It's reasonable for any human being to change 1%.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I love.
So, what would you say to the guy out there, or woman, because I do have women listening, but mostly we're men focused here.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
what would you say to a guy out there who's experienced any or all of what you've been through, to get them to that point of change?
Welcome to the human experience. You're not alone. I mean, you just heard Bill and I talk. He was exposed to porn when he was 6. I was exposed to pornography when I was 8. I've struggled with all of the suicidal ideation and the depression and the anxiety and the OCDs and all those things. And I've met so many people who are going through the same experiences as you. And this is a little bit of a shock, and I hope it is you're not special,
Hmm.
right? In those things. If you think you're alone, if you think no one else understands you, fun fact, you're not special.
Well, you're special just like everybody else.
Exactly. You're special just like everyone else because we're all made unique and in God's image, and that's all incredibly important, but your situation isn't unique.
Exactly.
Right? There's 8 billion people in this world. You can't tell me there's not at least one or two other people out there who have gone through something similar.
Hmm.
So I would first tell you, talk to your best friend about it. As hard as that might be, I guarantee you, if you talk to your friend, one of two things is going to happen. He's either going to meet you with love and say, dude, me too.
Hmm.
Right? And your connection's going to be deeper. Or he's going to say, what? Gross. And then you're going to realize he's not an actual good friend. And you're going to go find some people who are going to say, me too.
Yeah, and that support, that person that is supportive, that has been through what you've been through, in my experience, that's where the healing takes place, is having that support, knowing that you're not alone, and now you can move forward to change.
Yeah, everyone needs love to feel valued and to be accepted,
Yeah.
right? And how can you expect to be loved, feel valued, and accepted if you don't give people the opportunity to love, value, and accept you?
And your story about coming clean with all that you'd been through and it was met with love, well, there you go. That was your catalyst to move forward to change because you got that loving support.
Absolutely. And for you listening, you awesome dudes, right? There is someone in your life right now who is that catalyst for you, just
No.
waiting for you. Whether they know it or not, the catalyst does, but they're waiting to love and accept you.
And let's bring that to their significant other, their spouse or partner. You said earlier that, you were dabbling in porn even after you were married and things like that.
Mhm.
What would you say to the guy out there who needs to come clean with their spouse or partner?
It's the hardest, best thing you're ever going to do in your entire life,
Mm. Hmm.
right? Because by choosing to stay in your addiction, there's a few things that you choose. And this is a pretty harsh opinion, but it's true.
Hmm.
You're choosing to hurt your wife. You're choosing to betray your wife. You're choosing selfishness and you're choosing insecurity. By coming forward and talking to your wife, you're choosing your wife. You're choosing responsibility. You're choosing accountability and you're choosing change.
Yeah, and it's a big risk to come clean, right?
It is. There's a good chance that you're going to come clean to your wife and she's going to leave you,
Hmm.
right? That's a risk you're going to have to take.
Yeah. But to stay in it and continuing to feel that shame or whatever it is that's going on the inside that's causing you to do even more or whatever,
Mhm.
that's a pretty heavy price to pay.
Oh, 100%. There is some research that I've heard about that as you choose to dabble in pornography and masturbation, anytime you do it, the threshold that you currently live at, there's a major drop in your ability to produce dopamine, to be happy, and to live, and your energy levels. All of it drops aggressively, and then it doesn't quite come back up to the same. So by choosing to stay in your addiction, you're actually all of the fear, all of the anger, all of the tiredness, the exhaustion, everything you're experiencing, you're actually making it worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it goes back to the long game that Bill was talking about, right? It's that delayed gratification that a lot of those guys that first get into addiction recovery work and they're choosing to fight for their hearts. For those guys, I've got two pieces of advice. The first is to read Wild at Heart by John Eldredge.
Right.
Yeah. And have you ever heard of that book before?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Phenomenal
Always,
book.
I blank on authors' names, but the title, I got that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Wild at Heart. And it's going to tell you how to be a man fully within your heart. And then the second, that as you choose sobriety and you choose your wife and you choose a full-hearted life, over time, you'll start to realize and you'll start to see that the life without it is so much more rich, so
Mm.
much more full, so much more fulfilling. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It just means it's so much better.
And no matter what your addiction is, whether it's
No,
the porn or drugs or
yeah,
alcohol or whatever. Yeah.
right. I'm going to break down addiction into three steps.
Go ahead.
You ready for this, Bill? I love this. This is amazing. So three things happen that causes an addiction. There's a trigger,
Right.
right? Some outworld experience. And then there is a reaction to that trigger, which is typically the addiction.
Hmm.
And then after that action, there's a response. That's an entire addiction. I'm stressed because my wife is yelling at me. So I go and watch porn and masturbate. And the response to that is I feel better,
Mm.
right? In the moment. In the
Exactly.
moment. There's that dopamine dump. I feel high. I feel wild. I feel dangerous, right? It's exciting. And it's a tool, right?
Mm.
Addiction is just a tool. So the trick is to figure out what the trigger is, change the response to get a better outcome.
And that goes back to self-awareness because a lot of that is subconscious repeating of patterns that you've gotten into, and you're not even aware that that's happening. It's just automatic pilot.
Yeah. Like I always tell people, like, if you just had a relapse, cool. What's the last thing you remember before you relapse? I was angry at my wife. Perfect. Now we have a threshold.
There you
So
go.
next time you know you're angry at your wife, you know exactly what you're about to choose, unless you change the response,
Right.
right? Maybe
You
it's
can
to
accept
call.
that you want to, and
Mhm,
that's part of what I teach with mindfulness. You can accept that you're angry and you want to go act out.
mhm.
Yet you act on what's important to you. Is this going to hurt my wife? Is this going to hurt me? What's my value here? And when I can choose that versus the behavior, you're on your way.
Yeah, 100%. Maybe a skill to leave your guests with, right? If you have a significant other or a spouse, or kids or parents, someone that you love in your life, I want you to take a picture of them and make it your cover on your phone or wherever you choose to act out,
Mm,
laptop, desktop, phone. And anytime you're going to choose to act out, I want you to take a really good look at that person that you love. And I want you to say, you're worth more,
mm, beautiful.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
you're worth more.
I love it.
And then put the phone down, get up and get out.
There you
But
go.
choose them before you choose the other.
And oftentimes they need support. It's not just putting it down and moving away, but go get some support.
Yeah, phone calls.
Yeah, whatever it takes.
Hmm.
Well, good brother, Chase, I really appreciate your time today. Just and your vulnerability to share your story with such openness is just amazing. And you're helping us to destigmatize mental health, and that's what all this is about. And if someone wants to get in touch with you and to find out more about you and the Wellness Center, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. So you can go directly to my podcast, right? On YouTube, if you look up the Wellness Center podcast or on Spotify or Apple, you can find me there. If you want to contact me personally, you can get to my email at chase@thewellnesscenter.life. If you want to go to my website and learn a little bit more about what I do like day to day, as well as my podcast, you can go to www.thewellnesscenter.life. And those are all the best ways to get in contact with me.
All right. And for those listening, I will have that in the show notes as well. Well, Chase, thank you so much for sharing your story and all that you do. And I wish you continued success in everything.
And Bill, thank you so much for creating a platform to destigmatize mental health. The fight that you're doing is the most righteous and worthy cause that we as men can do. So for those listening as well, please make sure to like and subscribe to this podcast. Bill is a stud.
Thank you, good brother. I appreciate it, Chase.
Thank you, Bill.
And someone of your age, you said you're 28 years old, and to have this consciousness and the 18 years of what you've been through to be where you are today, brother, that takes a lot of courage and strength. And to see a young man do this is inspiring to me. So just give yourself some props there.
Thank you, Bill. It's been a very hard fought fight, against all odds. It's been a lot of work, and it's been worth every hard moment.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I tell that, to my patients and clients that, this hard work, it is hard work. It doesn't just because you think about it, you think you know it, and then you go on. No, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of practice. And yet every bit of that work and practice makes it all worthwhile.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bill.
And that's going to do it for this bonus episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the Rising Above Addiction with Chase Warburton episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I thank you for listening. And I thank Chase once again for sharing his story and his knowledge with us. You can find Chase's contact information and links in the show notes. Now, coming up on the next episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, I'll be talking about passive-aggressive behavior. Like when someone says they're okay when they're not, or they give you the silent treatment or cold shoulder, they pout, they use sarcasm, or maybe they agree to do something and then don't do it. Well, I'll talk about how crazy-making passive-aggressive behavior can be in relationship and what you can do about it, whether it's your spouse or partner doing it or you doing it. Please join me for the Hidden Agendas, Overcoming Passive-Aggressive Behavior in Relationship episode. Now remember, if you have a topic or idea you'd like for me to talk about, or if there's something going on in your relationship you need help with, or just want to give me some feedback, I would love to hear from you. Please email me at bill@menonthepathtolove.com, or just go to my website at menonthepathtolove.com, where you can download my free cheat sheet, 5 Ways to Communicate Better in Relationship. You can also sign up for a free coaching session on how to communicate better in relationship. That's at menonthepathtolove.com. And I would be totally grateful if you were to spread the word about my podcast. Tell a friend or neighbor or post it on social media, whatever. Share the link and share the love. And until next time, keep your heart open and stay on the path to love.